the Adventure Party for the 14th of January 2022. This week, the Tome of Gygax reveals the secrets of the gods, of magic, and of time. QV. The Adventure Party, discussing tabletop and radio gaming the Irish way. Welcome once again, brave warriors, to another excursion of the Warlord Scarr and his very loyal and probably not chaotic evil henchman. Don't worry, I have a chart in front of me saying exactly how loyal my henchman Savage is.
Yes, well, that just looks like a balance sheet, which would be accurate. I am as loyal as I'm paid to be. Yes, it is I, Savage Mick, once again following through the stacks and tomes of D&D Academia, while the Sage, Scholar and Warlord, quite a few strings on that arbalist.
Well, you slay, you knock over a few nations, you learn a few things. But yes, we're once again going into Gary Gygax's Dungeon Master's Guide to understand. Actually, this is one thing I was part of researching for a future episode. Someone else has brought up that this is not the only great and celebrated tome of Gygax's wisdom that is lauded by the community. Apparently, he wrote another book at some point, I suspect sometime shortly after he was ousted from TSR, a book called Role-Playing Mastery.
So the PhD level of dungeoning or mastering your dungeons, or gaming your mastery.
Possibly something for a future event after, the necessary 13 years for us to get through this book.
I'd like to know if you had an editor on that one.
That's a question.
Has anyone ever been able to rein Gary in? Okay, so we're going to start off where we left last time, which is at time. Page 37 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, first edition, if you're following along at home. Right, big old block of stuff here.
This is where we get one of the most infamous and oft-quoted quotes of this game. In the second paragraph, where all of a sudden, despite mostly being relying on randomly bolding his trademarks for most of the book, now Gary brings out the all caps as he declares from on high, carved upon the pages like stone tablets, "You cannot have a meaningful campaign if strict time records are not kept."
Yikes. It looks quite nice in Futura. There's those big, bold, round O's, Times New Roman would have been too monumental, Trajan a little too sculptural, but here's a declaration you cannot pass. All caps, you need to have strict time records to have a meaningful campaign.
The exact reason why, of course, is elucidated at some length as an almost unrecognizable as what we would call group role-playing example is brought out before us. The setup here is that we start off with 4 veteran people who've built up their characters level 3, 4, 5 or so. And they have just done a dungeon and they're splitting off to do all their different stuff. So they've all split off, done their own thing, and the GM is taking meticulous time based on where they're going, how many days it'll take them to hex crawl over there, talk to the sage, pay the sage ridiculous amounts of money, and they'll come back. And in the meantime, a couple of new players have shown up. And they say, well, we want to go to level 1 dungeon and get some loot. And apparently this is beneath the veterans of the campaign. So the situation is apparently that the veterans just go off to another table to play whatever backgammon or something for a few hours while the GM does stuff with the new players, and they go off and get rich. And it's only when their characters come back to town that the veteran players go, wait a minute, you're finding treasure in that dungeon. How is this possible? But because of the mismatches, they were going off to say what they did. Their characters are off doing something else. They can't interfere now to get the... it's this very convoluted tale of, well, you can't be part of this venture because you said you were going to do this, this, and this, and the strict time records have been kept. So, it's this weird thing where apparently the idea of the time records is another part of this system of, this isn't a campaign of a party, this is a campaign of various characters, and it is very important to know, depending on who's doing what, who can adventure with whom on a given in-game day. And I don't know if this, again, that comes back to this idea that Gygax apparently had no problem organising people to show up to his house for game day, but he had very big problems, making sure that continuity of time was preserved. So this was the thing that he had to break out the all caps for to help organise. And again, it's just how light years away from modern gaming this whole concept is.
I really feel like I need a chart for this one. I'm reading, it is a very dense column of text that goes on for almost a page. And on day 52, it started to read like one of those, if train A leaves Nantucket at 4:15, travelling at 62 miles an hour, and train B leaves Connecticut at 7 in the morning, travelling at 80 miles an hour, at what point will lunch be served in Massachusetts? Sometime around the 75th day of normal reckoning, not allowing for leap months. It's okay. What? So I'm trying to map this. I'm reading this, and yes, if you're describing the activities of characters in a world, say in the plot of a book.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing Tolkien would have been doing.
Yeah, okay, how long does it take the Hobbits to get to Isengard? Well, it depends how fast Nor can run. And look to the east on the third day kind of stuff. And Tolkien's figured out, well, Gandalf had to go here, and he had to get the guys and the horses, and they had to pony up, and then they got to arrive at the ridge, and they were there a half day early, so they said, look, let's just wait for them to get the battle started. We'll play backgammon behind this ridge, and then tomorrow morning we pop it. Big surprise. Everyone will be delighted. I did say 3 days. Horses are fast. It's like, what is going on for the players who are sat at a table? Or, I don't know, I'm not really sure what Gary's house is like. Perhaps they're lounging on couches. I don't know. He's behind a screen, extolling, where no one can see him. And he's laying out that some of these people don't necessarily want to go into the noob dungeon. So they're like, well, LFG for someone else. I don't get it. I don't get who's supposed to be doing what in this example, because I can accept that you might describe the events in the game like this, but I can't understand how you're meant to engage a party, a table of players, if you're going to be this strict about it. Because dungeoneering is fairly kind of full contact between GM and players. Do you go down this corridor? Do you look in that chest? Have you heard those monsters? There isn't a lot of time to cut to other people and do other things. Or maybe there is, I don't know. But he must have had some kind of tracker board or something in front of him.
Yeah, it feels like if rather than have this weird rambling example, that having like an example of how he organized his time records might have been more pertinent to the thing. Because like this, again, there's OSR circles who keep repeating this one quote, but the actual page or so of text isn't tremendously elucidating as to what the advantage of the whole procedure is.
Our method. How might we do this, Gary, and what should we be paying attention to? Like, because action in the dungeon is pretty much minute to minute. Overland travel...
There's a section here about how it is split into 10-minute rounds.
There's time in the dungeon, yeah. But just dealing with that first section, I'm a bit stuck. Nice idea. I'd like to see it keep it all straight. I mean, I suppose we have to give him some credit. He's probably, at the time, one of the best dungeon masters in the world. And probably would still be one of the best today. Because, he made up the tricks to go with the system.
As far as I know, he was basically running some version of his original campaign right up till 2008. Huh. Apparently he had finally relented in his everyone starts at level 1 rule because the kobolds in his the top of Castle Greyhawk had gotten so buff from all the adventures they'd killed that he needed to start people at level 3 just so they could get through the first dungeon level.
Could he not have just started them on smaller kobolds?
No, that would break continuity and time records, because the kobolds had definitely killed dozens of parties of first level people over the years, so they definitely had more weapons and armor, and definitely had some priests and leveled up.
Okay, yeah, it's time dilation appears to be what he's suggesting here, I think. Fair play if you can do it, I guess. I think this section lacks a little in that it could have done with a little more. And here's how you do the thing I'm suggesting.
It's an interesting sentiment, but I think it needs A, context, and B, a clearer example of what you're getting out of, making people play at the other side of the table for most of a session. But again, he didn't really think of it in terms of sessions as a thing. It was just like, people around my house, some of them might want to play right now.
Did he? I wonder, were there elements of his campaign that he ran when there were no players there? He just did it on his own, out loud, like a mental. I'm starting to imagine he probably did.
One of the questions I want to know, did this example actually happen to him? Did he have a time when, say, Rob Kuntz and his pals were in the middle of were between sessions, and 2 new people showed up, and the rest of the veterans just like, I can't be bothered, making some first level characters to shepherd these people through. Let them go in the deep end, and we'll go off and play some random Avalon Hill game you've got in your back. I wonder, did this actually happen in play, or is this just him coming up with an example?
Okay, a little further in, he starts to talk about some of the ramifications of this. So players E and F, who I think originally went into the noob dungeon, have the choice of awaiting the return of A, who I think went to see an oracle with a henchman in tow, or of going on adventures which involved only the 2 characters. In effect, player character A is out of it until game time in the central playing area reaches day 75, when communications can be made, or until other player characters contact him on his return from the oracle, let us say, assuming nothing important transpired. So it would appear that you just have people sitting around going, apparently I'm travelling now and I can't really do anything. Okay, yeah. This is beyond splitting the party. This is splitting the party geographically, one thing, fine. Splitting the party temporally, like we're doing minute to minute for you, hour to hour for you, and day to day for you. Okay, right. Interesting. I guess we have to give him his voice in the last paragraph of this section. You may ask why time is so important if it causes such difficulties with record keeping, dictates who can or cannot go adventuring during a game session, and disperses player characters the 4 winds by its strictures. Well, as initially pointed out, it is a necessary penalty imposed upon characters for certain activities. Beyond that, it also gives players yet another interesting set of choices and consequences. Okay, I guess I'm a bit of a freak for what goes in the bottom of the backpack kind of gaming, the logistics stuff. So I suppose I can see how there's a similar fetish for timekeeping amongst others. Whew. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so we go on then to character spells. We jump from henchman to time to spell casting, and the mechanics of how clerics get their spells. And this is where an interesting point of world building sneaks into the text again that I don't think any future edition really comes back to. And this is the concept of who answers your prayers when a cleric gets up in the morning and prepares all their cure wounds. Because partly up to level 3 in cleric, it can just be your own willpower. It's just like you believe strongly in this cause or this alignment, and up to 2nd level spells, you can just have those ready to go. But then you get to level 3rd, 4th, and 5th spells. Those are actually coming from the supernatural servants of the cleric's deity. So you're up to the angels. The angels are giving you your spells, or the devils, or whatever.
Right.
And then once you get to the 6th and 7th level spells, which were the top level cleric spells at the time due to various factors, at that point you're getting the spells directly from God.
Okay, so it starts with the power of Thor compels me. Yeah, but it doesn't really, does it? Yes, he does. I say he does. I'm definitely compelled. Compelling now. And then it's representatives of Thor have been in touch and kind of cleared up some stuff, but they're contacting me and giving me work. And lastly, finished with, yeah, me and my mate Thor. He absolutely granted me these powers, and he says that I have to go and raise that orphanage. Okay, well, busy. Right, so you get a more and more direct line to your deity as you become a more powerful clerical spellcaster. Fine, yeah.
The ramifications of the same are sadly not given a huge amount of thing, although it is interesting that there's sort of implies that every morning when you say your prayers, it's sort of like a little performance review. If they have not been faithful to their teachings, followed the aims of their deity, contributed freely to the cause, i.e. money, and otherwise acted according to the tenets of their faith, it becomes unlikely that they will receive intermediary aid unless they make proper atonement and sacrifice. There can be no question that such clerics must be absolutely exemplary in their activities, expressions, and attitudes if they dare to contact their deity. So the closer you get to the top, the harsher the review every morning. You have to punch in on time.
Yeah, I can kind of get behind this. I think it's something that has been... It's a restriction that's been loosened to the point of kind of absurdity in later editions, where you're almost told, it doesn't actually matter what alignment you are, or how you behave, or what you even do. You're definitely still a cleric, and you're definitely still getting your spells. The idea of it kind of relying on what you did yesterday is going to reflect on what you get today is, I think, a good way of tempering the power of magic users like clerics with restrictions on how they roleplay. Or, if not restrictions, then there are parameters in which they have to attempt to behave. And of course, good GMs will use those to create moral dilemmas and drama and tension in a game. Because the cleric's now faced with, well, a bunch of different choices. Will they act pragmatically? Will they act morally, ethically? Or will they act inside the dictates of their faith, which might sometimes conflict with what they want to do, and is going to have a knock-on effect on how many spells they will have to cast, which obviously limits their effectiveness tomorrow. So it's a tough standard to be held to, but quite an interesting one from a role-playing point of view.
Yeah, it has all kinds of potential as a sort of role-playing tool. I like I'm more okay with this if you know who your overseeing angel is, or you do, if you're high enough level, you do actually hear the voice of God. I wouldn't have it be this impersonal, broke your alignment twice yesterday, so you only go up to level 3 spells, sorry. I would want it to be a personal relationship-based thing.
I think you could probably reflect the more genuine religious experience in that for minor transgressions, it's that guilty conscience. It's too simple to say, oh yeah, God peels the top of your head off and speaks directly into your brain. Sometimes it's your own niggling doubts and worries and concerns that are telling you that you didn't get it right, and you know it and God knows it, so try harder, dear cleric of mine. And then, obviously, for bigger transgressions, yes, burning bushes and flaming swords and a lot of interrupted sleep while angels appear in your bedroom.
The problem is, of course, why does God show up to annoy me every time I do naughty things, but it doesn't stop Thargor the Infinite from, killing thousands of people and raising them as zombies? Why is the sort of weird Planescape pact of neutrality prevent him from stopping evil from happening, but is perfectly okay with him sending a couple angels to break my kneecaps? It's one of those things that you have to sort of flesh out a little bit more. This is an interesting idea, but again, needs to be sort of bring out. And a lot of people don't like having big obvious deities in their games because it feels they're looking for the grand narrative. They're looking for the underdog. Whereas Gygax is going for more of a we'll see how far you these morons get and whether they change the world in the process sort of campaign.
I think this section it again sets up an interesting idea that Gary has, but it falls prey to the Gygaxian harshness on the penalty side. The consequences are immediate and dire, whereas I think this is much more interesting if the consequences are actually a little subtle. Maybe you miss out on a first level spell tomorrow, or maybe you have a higher chance of spell failure for the rest of the day. But Gygax often puts up these good ideas and systems, and then the downside is so harsh that over time I think people have abandoned any downside, because it starts at, this is awful and it's going to get worse. If we look at 5th Ed, it has a similar problem with the exhaustion rules, which are crippling to begin with and only get worse after that. A slightly subtler start to that avalanche would probably mean they were used a bit more often. So then that's clerical spells, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of really, really religious language, like what was it? The deity. In the latter case, when the unfaithful cleric desires spells above the 5th level, the deity is certainly going to be highly displeased and absolute. The deity, you, the DM, will point out all of the transgressions, state a course of action which must be followed to regain good graces, grant the spells which the deity deems are necessary to complete the course, but never in excess of those which clerics normally use, and pronounce anathema upon the cleric until satisfactory redemption has been made, i.e., the cleric cannot call again upon the help from his or her deity or its minions until he or she has regained favour through a course prescribed by the deity. Yes, Gygax is terrible for putting all these big absolute consequences into every action, but the way he rates them is great.
Yeah, you're left in no doubts that this is definitely a judgment.
There's a section on what happens if you change alignment a couple of times.
Yeah.
Once a cleric changes deities, he or she must thereafter be absolutely true to the new calling, or he or she will be snuffed out by some godlike means.
Okay. Roll a new character. Yeah, wow. Thrice changed clerics, instantly killed.
It's an interesting thing, but again, it's interesting, it's flavorful, but people just aren't tremendously big on question of how much license the GM should have. It sort of attacks us from both angles, both because players would rather have like solid mechanics for what happens if they breach a code and you get stuff like the paladin loses 1 smite per day or something. But also, GMs will look at this and go, well, that's not how things work in my setting. I have to come up with my own strictures, how the gods work in my setting. And so it sort of gets dug under from both ends.
Yeah, except we've a safety net here, because Gary's told us that players shouldn't be reading this stuff anyways. So they should never know what the consequences are. But they should know that they're definitely there. So what's the old saying? Muck about and find out?
Yeah, something like that.
Okay, so that's poor old clerics are well under deity's thumbs here. However, the arcane freelancers that are magic users in the sort of thaumaturgic sense, well, they don't have to worry about any of the upper management stuff, do they?
Well, they do, because the first line of the magic user section is, inform those players who've opted for the magic user profession that they have just completed a course of apprenticeship with a master who was of unthinkably high level, at least 6th. Well, that's your learned out of a book in the back of a barn backstory just shredded there. Gygax cares not for your creative writing classes.
Probably read his Ursula Le Guin at this point and decided he liked what he'd seen.
Theoretically, there's nothing wrong with having this sort of hard, just tell the players you have a master. But again, this is very much this should probably have been in the PHB. If you're not going to have people making up their own magic user backstories, then you should probably have that be up front in the actual player materials. But this is also, people have been complaining about the Sorcerer since 3rd edition came out, but this kind of big blanket, you are part of the wizarding machine thing is why the Sorcerer was created, because it just comes with all this baggage. It's not just, you have to have this giant book that if it gets wet, you can't cast spells. It's not just that. It's this idea that you're, by default, forced into this big, doom-laden ivory tower academia
this your rant against acting? Okay.
No, this is well, it's Gygax's.
But Gygax didn't think much of them, did he?
It's the paradigm of you have to have gone through this college course to get anywhere in the adventuring business. And
well, look, he says you've got a master that you've studied under. He doesn't really, at least not to begin with, he doesn't say it's Hogwarts exactly. I mean, there's lots of different ways you could be apprenticed. So presumably there's some leeway in terms of world building, etc. But yeah, there's definite you've got to learn this from somebody aspect of this.
Which it's also sort of activates the who was the first wizard then? Who did the first wizard learn from? As a sort of a world building trick. You know, that's the sort of thing that annoys some people for a couple of admittedly nitpicky reasons.
Oh, that's easy. You're whoever the magic user is in your campaign attains a sufficiently high rank to cast teleport through time, and goes back and starts the whole thing.
I guess.
There, simple. It's got no start and no end. Yay! And you've placed your players firmly at the center of it.
Moving on from that admittedly minor point is this section is a lot more explicit and mechanical than the cleric section, because it does actually go through the process of how your master, who no rules for what to do when you ask them for a favor or anything, but it does break out like you will have gotten these random spells based on your master will have given you one offensive spell, which might just be light or push. One defensive spell, which might be something like affect normal fires or dancing lights, and one miscellaneous spell, as well as I think you automatically get read magic because otherwise your spell book doesn't work really.
Oh, you could always use tracing paper. So yeah, okay.
No, it's rare inks. Rare inks. You have to give super rare inks.
That's right, yeah. And super rare tracing paper. Like basilisk wings aren't easy to come by.
Well, one of the things is that because of the way that he has run out these tables, it means that the wonderful and secret spells of Tensor's floating disc and Nistel's magic aura, those are partly secret information that your character must find out in the wild.
Yeah, this was the end of every magic user versus magic user fight in this edition of D&D. A mad scramble to get the blood-soaked and singed pages from the cold corpse-like grasp of the opposing magic user, just to see if they had any spells you didn't know that you could copy into your book, which is kind of cool. There's a grubby sort of battlefield scavenger aspect to wizards that you don't really see much anymore.
I do agree that is cool. That is a cool thing. The problem for me is that no other class has this. So there's no section where the fighter is trying to rip out the other fighter's heart to drink his blood or anything like that. Maybe there should be.
Definitely going to check out his weapons, though.
Yeah, but like a wizard can get a magic wand. So like it's not like at this point that fighters have a monopoly on magic swords or anything.
True. Oh, look, magic is always going to be a big subsystem in a fancy role-playing game. There's just no getting around it.
Yeah, and I get that, but it's just like, it is interesting to have these extra incentives in the game, but the game already has a lot of incentive. It has gold, which gives you XP, it has monsters, which give you XP, and it has magic items, which lots of people can use. So, is it okay for one class to have this extra special other incentive to go, murder everyone in a bathrobe to see what their books have?
I'm not sure. I'm in a position to argue from first principles the justification for magic users as a class in a fancy role-playing game. I kind of think you're going to have to simply accept there's more time given to the favourite son of kind of genre of fantasy. That and the dragons is kind of what sets it apart from just being miserable in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll release our episode about how to solve the problems, the difference between fighters and wizards any day now. But in the meantime, yeah, this is a lot. Again, this is overall a lot more dry. Although there is the once again a reminder that illusionists are different from magic users by various esoteric means, and they need an extra special section.
Why is this? Yeah, I'm reading this going, they don't get read magic or anything like it. Spellbooks and scrolls are written in a separate secret magical language as opposed to all the other secret magical languages that just common wizards use.
At least this one does something.
Why? What's the thinking here? What makes illusionists so different?
I don't know. The illusionist just sort of popped out of like the first couple episodes of Dragon Magazine, I think. And it's just a whole bunch of spells that Gygax and a party just never thought that his spellcasters would really want. I don't know if he wrote it or if someone else wrote it and he just really loved it, but he felt the need to keep illusionist as a separate thing for until second edition, when I think second edition was when suddenly you could have multiple schools of magic that had specialists. But yeah, it was just this weird thing. I don't know why Gygax just sort of zeroed in the illusionist as needing to be in his game, but it clearly struck a chord for him.
Doing something for him, yeah. Folks, if you know why Gygax had such a crush on illusionists, do be sure to join our Discord and let us know. Right, so then we get another section on spells beyond those at start, which is basically the importance of scouring the battlefield, and probably even doing swap meets.
Oh yeah, there's a big, complicated example of... actually, this is... Gygax's ways of naming random characters is because we have stuff like Reduolint, the Prestidigitator, or Thigru Thorkison.
I quite like Halfdan the Necromancer.
And Olaf Bluecheeks.
Olaf Bluecheeks and his associate
Halfdan the Necromancer.
Alright, Halfdan.
It's like, just explaining, like, apparently the knowledge of casting one third level spell is such a horribly hard-won secret through years of magical research that Halfdan will require knowledge of another spell return plus a minor magic item such as 3 potions, 3 spell scrolls, or perhaps a ring of invisibility. Here's the 1 ring. Can I learn how to cast lightning bolt from you, please?
Right. It's kind of if you've ever had a bunch of kids come back from trick or treating Halloween and they spill out all their stuff on the floor and then start horse trading over it. It kind of has an air of that to it.
It's interesting because, like, in the universe, the fluff makes sense. It's like the spells are this hard fought for thing where people have quested for years to get all the magic components and all the gold to fund their wizard towers so they could finally figure out this spell. But in game, it's like, hey, we've both made wizards. Let's all each pick different spells and just swap them with each other so that the party is better. Again, this is this sort of idea that Gygax just could not assume that the party would work together, and so the game is written with the assumption: why are these players exploiting the game by giving each other spells? Don't they realize that their characters would find that weird? But the players are thinking in terms of the party, not in terms of their individual goals and wizard towers and such.
I don't think the idea that the party would pool their resources to get the party tank plate mail as soon as possible ever really crossed his mind.
Yeah.
It's every man for himself in the Hobbesian/Gygaxian sphere.
Which, to be fair, if you hear some of the things that Rob Kuntz would do when they were just playing in Gygax, he would just have solo sessions where it was him either sending in an wave after wave of orc mercenaries to clear dungeons, or it would be his fighter with like a ring of invisibility and boots of silence and just sneak around the dungeon, just trying to find everyone who's off their own, stab them in the back and try to nick all their loot and run away.
He sounds like an absolute bore.
Partly they found this riveting, but that again, this is very much a very different way of playing. I just want to, before we move on, I just wanted to go over, return to a great old feature, how to stretch your dictionary, as we found the first of this section. Naturally, magic user players will do their utmost to acquire books of spells and scrolls in order to complete their own spellbooks. To those acquired, the magic user will add one and only one spell when he or she actually gains a experience level, QV, which I looked up my acronyms. QV is Quod Vitae, and I did not check what Quod Vitae means. Hold on. Which sea? What? Use after a term to indicate that more information on the term is available elsewhere. Okay, so he's a...
Okay.
Okay.
Experience, then.
Yeah. Therefore, most will be frantically attempting to purchase or cousin spells from non-player characters, magic users, or from even from other player characters.
Is that a fancy way of saying steal?
It says trick or deceive.
Dupe, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Cousin, C-O-Z-E-N, to trick or deceive. Love it.
It's just like, I don't worry, I'm a spellbook cleaning service.
Get all the crumbs out of the spine. All right. So yeah, it does touch on some of the different ways that you get hold of spells, including this sort of magical swap meet that is part trick and treat doling out and part Mexican standoff, depending on how you've been getting on so far. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like beg, borrow, steal spells. That's kind of the way.
Yeah, there was a line about the game is hardly worth the candle to explain that no, you should be trying to kill, steal your spells, because paying for them is a sucker's game. And again, we all know how Gygax thinks about suckers. Then there's an interesting section of how many hours of sleep you need per spell.
Is it interesting, or is it just bookkeeping?
Well, yeah, it's mostly just bookkeeping.
But we've been impressed upon how important it is to have accurate time records, so okay, fair. So basically, if you thought the Sleepy Warlock meme was a new thing, then we've got you need a solid 8 hours if you want to get a 5th or 6th level spell under your belt. So the Napping Wizard is right there at the start. Need spells. I'm gonna need at least all of tomorrow off if I'm gonna be able to.
Yeah, 12 hours if you want me to get my net level spells back. So, which again, if you're doing your timekeeping and you say, well, you really burned through spells, so you're going to need to have a proper rest. But it also allows for, if someone wants to have a nap instead of a full day's rest and just get their magic missiles back, that becomes more of an option if you're willing to limit yourself. But again, my main thought here is this is something a wizard should know. Presumably they have cast a spell and recovered their spells at least once or twice during their long apprenticeship to Redolent the Prestidigitator. Again, this should probably be PHB information, but anyway.
Yeah.
Now we come to an actually very... Again, world building gets suddenly shoved into this rulesy text where it's going into the complicated combination of energy and planar exchanges that cause spells to happen. And I'm still not sure exactly how to interpret it. It seems like you absorb energy from the positive, negative material planes, and then when you do the magic hands and say the magic words. This apparently combines together into an antimatter reaction, and that opens a gate to the other planes, and that's the spell comes out of combining the other planes' energy together.
So the problem here is that for some reason, it's a quirk of history that the STEM kids decided that their favorite pastime was to play make-believe in worlds of magic, where there just isn't a good Newtonian/quantum effect reason for magic to work. So trying to have, this is, to my mind, a waste of paper and ink. Trying to explain the mechanics behind how and why magic works is a folly. And it always will be a folly. And I don't know how many people are going to continue to make this mistake. Magic works because it's magic. It doesn't work because it is knockoff on-brand physics. So stop trying to boil it down to the quarks and stranges. It is magic. You can explain in gross mechanical terms. Well, we need this many souls, or we need to crush up this amount of manticore eyeball. But that doesn't explain why it works, because there isn't an explanation for why it works. If you had an explanation for why it works, it would be science.
But Savage, this book is about making those people shut up.
Fair enough.
This book is full of these sections, which is just...
Get the physicist to go back to playing his barbarian and shut the hell up.
Yeah, some player is going to raise an actually. This is... there's a huge amount of this book which you can interpret. Like, you're wondering, what the hell is this for? And you realize, oh, it's an actually defense.
Oh, boy.
So you know that Gygax was having those moments regularly, and he was having to make stuff up. And he decided at some point that he was going to make up the definitive thing and put it on page 40 of the DMG, and this is what the player would, the GM would refer to whenever someone got really persnickety about exactly where it does.
Okay, it might stop the grossest of inquisitions, but if you lay some of this stuff out, I guarantee you 10 sessions down the line, you're going to be sitting there watching your players build the large thaumaturgic collider based on the principles you've laid out, and it is not going to end well. Probably it shouldn't. Get the Cthulhu Mythos book out. Start throwing those things at them.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they were actually in the old D&D's Demigods supplement.
Yeah, but if you start building high energy magical equipment, that's when the tentacles start tearing through your reality. That's why we don't do that research anymore.
But yeah, it's just like, I kept reading this section, and it was just like, are wizards just electricians, or are they batteries?
Exactly. So, read it, see if you agree with it. It's like, it is as good or as bad an explanation how magic works as any of the rest of them. Frankly, waste of time. You're only opening yourself to further ums and ahs.
And, of course, at the end, there's the great appeal to Jack Vance as the explanation as to why this spell slot nonsense is so important. Presumably it was just considered okay to just pimp. Because, like, there's a section, like, the infamous Appendix N is near the back of this book, but apparently it also needs to call out during the book as well to remind you. It actually mentions another author called Belair, which is not a Fresh Prince, but apparently another 60s author, The Feast and the Frost.
Vance in Magic is always brought up as, well, this is where spell levels come from. Sure, but if you read The Dying Earth, there are other forms of magic in there, or things that are mistaken for magic, that don't rely on that system. So it is just one way of doing magic, and it wasn't even the only way, or even the best way of doing it. It was just the way that the characters that you encounter in The Dying Earth had figured out how to do. So yeah, Fancy Magic is it's always kind of run up the flagpole as, this is why D&D Magic is the way it is. It kind of tracks a little bit, but there's more to it. It's a good book, read it. Right, tribal. So that brings us to the kind of folks who would more likely to carve their spells onto your bones than writing down a nice book.
Tribal spellcasting. Apparently, it was very important that you have witch doctors and shamans available as NPC as monster options.
Is this going to be one of these sections that doesn't age particularly well? Well, let's look at the races that are called out as being tribal spellcasters. Again in block cap. And it'll come as no surprise to learn that it is anything that's hairy or green or reptilian or goblinoid. There's where the shamans and witch doctors hang out.
Although apparently cavemen count as something equivalent to like giants or gnolls or goblins. Although they apparently get a much higher maximum level of witch doctor than other of these. Apparently they can have normal clerics as well as witch doctors.
Okay. Cavemen seem to get an awful lot of exceptions, yeah. Or at least a few important ones.
It is important to say that, of course, a tribe can have either shamans or witch doctors, but not both.
Except cavemen.
Except.
Who also have normal clerical members, oh my god. It's like and henchlings, henchmen and underlings and hirelings, etc., etc. Right, spell explanations. Ooh, special commentary. The special commentary section is probably worth having a look at. We can skip over the ins and outs. So a lot of these spells will have been rewritten several times over the course of D&D. But yeah, so what does he say about special commentary for referees?
A playing aid of this sort will likely be done in the not too distant future. and that will serve your needs far better than a spread herein. There are, however, quite a number of special notes which you must be apprised of, as spells are often abused by players. Gee, players sometimes abuse their own special abilities. Who knew? I wonder, did that play aid actually come out? Because I know there was a whole bunch of stuff came out around this time. Various maps. I believe there was something called geomorphs, which were like the little tiles that you would sort of slot together to make dungeons. But I don't know if there was like a handy like list of cards with the spell descriptions on them like you would have for 5th Ed.
So this section's essentially errata to some of the spells that have caused concern. So he dips into things like Detect Magic and Animate Dead to give further explanations as to how they work. And the ones that draw my eye in all of this section, of course, are the ones that come with some accompanying images. In this case, glyphs and diagrams, which kind of, I look at them now, I'm seeing a magic circle here and a pentagram and some runes and glyphs for things like lightning and fire, and I'm thinking to myself, you see, this stuff was catnip for the Mothers Against D&D Satanic Panic Brigade. They cracked it open to page 42 and went, aha, see, there, they're teaching our children how to summon the devil. So, yeah. Although, nice to have a few diagrams to give you a sense of what the wizarding character is looking at.
Yeah, it's just interesting when these little sections of, like most of the thing is written with this sort of generic mindset of, well, clearly, as a GM, you're going to come up with your own campaign setting. So, you'll decide everything. But then something very specific to Greyhawk, like these runes, or the antimatter reaction that causes magic to happen, that will slip in as well. And just as like, Gygax is trying to write this as if it is all things to all GMs, but his own ideas of how things work just keep slipping in. And that's both great and probably annoying to some people. But then again, I've generally found that being annoyed about this one thing in this book has been the fuel that has launched many a GMing career.
Keeps you pushing forward. It's, you know what, this is an interesting section to see what the clarifications around some of this stuff were. A lot of this probably makes its way into rewrites of these spells in later editions. Although it would be interesting, perhaps an exercise we don't have time for today, to sort of sit down with the PHB as well and compare and contrast and see what advice got reneged on later on. But I'm just trying to look for an interesting example. Scanning the page here. Oh, like lightning bolt.
No, I think the first one, like, they're just to whet the appetite is just the light spell. Where it's just like, yeah, it explicitly says a player can cast light on someone else's eyeballs and just blind them.
So it is also the blind spell.
Yes, but also there is the blind spell. But this is just...
Oh, he does make that note at the very end, doesn't he? That the reverse of any spell has to be learned separately. I think I noted that before.
That was an interesting thing that has also been dropped, this idea of reverses of spells.
Yeah. Right, well that's taken us about as far as we're going to go today, with some errata and some wasted time on the physics of spellcasting.
Yeah, we've got a grand total of 3.5 pages. Good run. Full episode. It's grand.
No, hold on a sec. We started back at time. That was about 10 pages ago. At least it seemed that way. Okay, but we better close out this episode now before I lose my place. Page 37 to page 47, I believe, so I think...
We're not going to go through this next time?
I don't think there's merit to it. I would invite our listeners to dip in here, because there's so many of these are just one line that says, oh, well, add another 40 feet if you're on high ground, or make sure to calculate the radius of a sphere while casting the spell. So I think we might leave that to the more avid listeners to discover. And next time we'll be pushing on to a section that starts with the adventure.
Oh, wow, finally, 50 pages in, we get to the adventure. Good.
Look, there's a lot of HR and other sort of stuff to be taken care of first. But
don't worry, it's a foreshadowing second edition adventure module, so we just need to get through 47 pages of stuff you don't understand to get to the adventure.
Excellent. Well, join us next time when we finally do start adventuring with the Gygaxian and continue to pick our way over land or over air or across the seas through the Dungeon Master's Guide. I've been Savage Mick.
I have been Warlord Scarr, and this party is over. Thanks for listening to The Adventure Point. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there, or talk to our Twitter account at AdventurePTY, or you can record a voice message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventureparty. We can also be contacted directly by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server, link in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike and Version 3 license.
Okay, pick one. Pick one that you really like, and we'll talk about it for like 3 minutes.
Let's see. The music lesson, which happens if you pick plane shift,
All
where
right.
you have to go through a complicated thing of perfectly aligned tuning forks, and apparently...
What? What?
Yeah, everyone forgets about the tuning forks.
Oh, because it's part of the spellcasting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where is it? Plane shift is a high level spell, right?
Page 42. Oh yeah, there's Cleric plane shift as well.
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh yeah, A sharp, for example, might take one to the astral plane, while an A flat will move one to the elemental plane of fire, or an A to the ethereal plane. And then, naturally, you can include octaves, or might have chords to move a creature to some subplane, such as F sharp minor might move the caster or subject to the 9th plane of hell, as opposed to any of the others.
Right. Yikes. Gary, come on. Now, no mention of how this is done, but sure, okay. That's a good one. I quite like another P, Polymorph, on page 45. Polymorph others. As is continually pointed out, henchmen and hirelings will not desire to be subjected to the effects of the spell. Furthermore, level of experience is not a part of character's form, so it is quite foolish and totally impossible to attempt to polymorph a creature into an nth level character. Man, it's like those rules you see written because somebody did it. No gorillas allowed in the ball pit. Likewise, profession is not form, so you can't get fighter thief results in human form and nothing else. Shape changers will be affected for but 1 round, then will return to their former form because they are rubber and you are glue.
I just like the idea that for all of his prescience, for all the things that he'd already picked out as a thing, actually people and people talking about their character and all that stuff, Gygax never anticipated the people who want to be turned into dragons. It's just like that fetish did not occur to his poor untainted Christian mind.
Well, I think that's where we draw a close to this. Good night.
Yeah.